Welcome to Inside Abode, ladies and gentlemen. How y'all doing? I'm your host, Dave Jones. This is season 8 of the podcast. Like, I can't believe it's season 8. But, you know, and I actually was telling our guests before this, the way that I do the seasons, so you might be like, dang, he's already on season 8. Because, like, look, I'm doing a bunch of different stuff, but I basically will stop and take a rest because, you know, doing a weekly podcast takes some time amongst other things and creating other types of content. So then I'll stop, and then that's how the seasons are. So if you had a question about why it's season 8 versus season 7, because we just got out of season 7, it literally is just because I'm taking a break. Other than that, though, thank you for listening. And before we get started with our guests, I want to invite you to hit the subscribe button. It is free. It costs you no money. There's gems being dropped every single week. Hit the subscribe button and subscribe to the podcast. I'm excited about season 8. I said this in season 7, but I'm really excited about season 8 because we have a lot of great guests, and you know, the goal is to bring some diversity to this. And so I'm really excited. We have a guest, Abode, that's going to be doing the interviewing today. So this is going to be dope. So Nick Casanova is with us today.
Up?
Yeah, what's up, Nick? How you doing, man?
I'm good. Excited to be here. Excited how this kind of came together. Liz hit me up. Was just like, oh, I'm doing this, you know, great event, and you know, what can we do to kind of like just put it on blast? And I'm super appreciative of Windermere Abode, our office, having this platform. So I was like, oh, here's an idea. So yeah, super excited.
That's dope, man. Yeah. So, and you brought a friend along today, and you already mentioned her, but go ahead and introduce your friend, man, and let's see what's going on here.
Yeah. So, Liz Morrow, the DIY guru of, I say Tacoma, but I think just online, her presence is ridiculous, and I've been watching her through the years do just amazing stuff, not only in the eyes of like a homeowner, but also in the eyes of a content creator. And then you're like, oh, and she's doing it all in Tacoma. And so Liz is having a great event, a DIY award event that I'm going to let her kind of tell you about. But I wanted to bring her on, talk about it, and I wanted to learn more about kind of her journey through the DIY world, what it's been like, what it's like doing it in Tacoma, and you know, what it has meant for her family, for her followers, and all that. So without further ado, Liz Morrow, thank you so much for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me on, you guys. This is really great. Yeah, DIY has been something that I have done basically my whole life. I started blogging in 2008, and at the time I was in college, and I was an art student and, you know, kind of finding yourself in college, and I decided to start a personal style blog. I grew up without any personal style, and so it was kind of a way for me to explore that side of my creativity. So I was just like blogging every day, posting pictures of my outfits, and from there it sort of just evolved. Like, I started doing more lifestyle stuff and more photography, and it just kind of grew into more of a cohesive and just all parts of my life. And then when we had our kid, I decided to pivot because I just wasn't really feeling passionate about what I was doing at the time, which was I was a wedding photographer. It just wasn't hitting the same. And I knew that I had loved doing interior design and home projects my whole life. I had watched my parents do, you know, renovating every single house that we ever lived in. So I was surrounded by it, and it was just a very normal thing to do. Like, when you have a house, you just like make it the way that you want it to be. So it was very much something that I had always wanted to do. And we had bought our first house in 2012. and had done immediately had to do work on it because we bought very much of a fixer-upper, and so we had to do all of the exterior siding immediately because we couldn't even get the insurance to cover it because the siding was so bad.
Oh, wow.
So we immediately had to do that. We did that project. My dad and my uncle came down and helped us do that project. So yeah, it was just kind of a natural shift from my more personal style stuff to home renovation, and the DIY aspect came in partially just because we don't have the resources or funding to just be able to hire out a contractor for all of the projects that we do, and I think that's a lot of people's experience. And so as I was doing these projects on my own home, I was sharing them online because that's what I do. And it was just a really amazing way to be able to connect with other people, especially women, because I found that, working on your house, using power tools, all that kind of stuff was a space that women were kind of historically excluded from. You go to a hardware store as a woman and you can tell that sometimes the workers look at you like you don't know what you're doing. And you're
Yeah.
I know what I need to get. So that part of it was really important to me, to be able to provide that sort of support for other women who didn't grow up in a family where it was normal to work on your house. And my dad brought me along with pretty much everything that he ever did. I was his little lackey tool hander to him. I need a screwdriver, and I hand him the screwdriver, whatnot. But so that was kind of where the content creation dovetailed with working on houses. And I think in Tacoma, it's really important because we have a lot of these really old homes. We have a lot of fixer-uppers. And so I think there is definitely a cool community in this area. And there's some cool resources that we have for renovating and fixing up old houses. So it's a fun community to be doing that in, for sure.
What's fascinating is going back to, you said you started blogging back, you say 2008, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And, I remember first meeting you, it was at Urban Exchange, and I think you were doing a fashion show with someone, and you were doing a fitting. And so this must have been about, I don't know, 2012, 2013, something like that, right? Yeah. So, but even at that time, I remember, okay, so you're in the world of fashion. That's how I kind of first knew of you. And then since then, you've put on many hats. You've done so many different things. All of a sudden, I remember, yeah, you're a wedding photographer and you're this fashion blogger. And I think it's fascinating to be able to jump into these different arenas, because change is scary for a lot of people. And so I guess, how were you able to kind of maneuver between one and the other, whether you were doing it simultaneously? Were you doing it simultaneously? I tried that, let's do this. Or, were you meaning to kind of go, this is done, now I'm going to do that sort of deal?
Yeah, I feel DIY as an ethos is sort of in my blood and bones to a certain degree. So when it comes to doing all of these different things, it's very much I see a thing and I'm I could probably do that. So, starting blogging, I was taking all my own outfit photos, by propping a little Canon Power Shot, which I don't even know if those exist anymore. Propping it up on my top of my microwave, and then my mom let me use her old DSLR, and so then I started using that and really enjoying the process of making the photos I was taking look the way that I wanted them to look, of other images that I saw. And then that sort of evolved into people asking me to shoot their weddings and, portraits and stuff like that. And I was like, sure. And I think for me, like what it comes down to is I always want to be living a life that allows me to be creative and express myself creatively. And so that's just always looked many different ways. I was an art major in college, so I immediately moved into doing graphic design after college. So I was a graphic designer, and then I was a photographer, and then I was an interior designer. And so I just like do all of these different things, and they just kind of ended up perfectly meshing together to be like all these different skills that you need to be a content creator. So like anytime I need, some sort of marketing materials, I can hop into Photoshop and create that. Or, if I need photos of merch that I'm selling, I can do that. Or just like designing the merch, I can do that. So it's always been something that I think I like doing it because it allows freedom. It allows me to be able to create what's in my head and bring that to life. But yeah, it is kind of funny just thinking about like all of the different things that have gone into, everything that I've had my hands in the past, almost 15 years now that I've been blogging.
Listening to you talk, it brings two things to mind for me. One, you're a serial entrepreneur, which a lot of us are. I think all of us on this call are kind of in that same vein in terms of just how we think. But I think what I hear when you talk about all these things, like I see most people will see the finished product or they'll see like your online presence right now. But like what I hear is that you've put in a lot of work and time and effort just naturally, just because of your curiosity and just your stick to itiveness and like wanting to do things yourself. But like you put in the time to learn how to do these things. And I think a lot of times people see stuff right now, they see the end product and go like, wow, like how do you do that? You make it look really easy, I guess. But there is a lot of time and like there's years of trial and error. And you talked about the Canon PowerShot. Like I know exactly what camera that is. It's a little silver thing that looks like I know exactly the camera. But like, yeah, and you can talk about all those things, and you were a graphic designer, and not everyone has a graphic design shop. Some people just have it naturally, but like you actually went to school to do that. Like, so a lot of this stuff takes time and effort and time and trial and error and all that kind of stuff. Falling down, getting back up, I don't know. I just think it's interesting because in our line of work, like Nick, you can speak to this. Like we're always wanting, we're all in a content creative like space. And content is king right now. So like we're always talking about creating content, but it does take some time and effort and energy to do it.
Yeah. And I think it's it just goes back to, small business and kind of, Liz is a perfect example of being a jack of all trades because you like have to be. There's no one else going to market you. There's no one else going to take that photo of you. Me setting up this light situation, it's just, you have to do it all. And so I think that's something coming from owning our business years ago and having that experience, it gives me more appreciation for anyone who's just out there just hustling. And let's be real, not just the people who are like, oh man, I'm grinding, I'm a grinder, I'm out there just hustling, I wake up super early. Like it's the people I see out there putting in the efforts, putting in the work, when a lot of the times the benefit, a lot of times the benefit is down the road and they're just getting by. Like they're just making, I think of, a bunch of business owners in Tacoma and what. So then, I see what Liz is doing as she's grown, as, you've morphed into all these different things. I'm like, shit, that is so much for one person to do, let alone at a quality level. Like the consistency is one thing, but to constantly continue to like improve yourself, it has to be tough. You make it look easy, and going from that, like, I know I've met your family, I met your parents before, and when we were like looking at houses, one thing I remember is that like you and your dad had like your own language. Like you, without talking to each other, you were talking to each other, going through a kitchen, whatever. And I would assume that a lot of your inspiration kind of came from there. Am I wrong?
Oh yeah, for sure. And both of my parents are totally different, but they have a very similar, I think, approach. And they see challenges as like learning opportunities and opportunities to be creative, and so it was a really great way to grow up because you get to see your parents figuring out these problems, and I wasn't excluded from that process. Like I was always sort of involved in it. Like I remember my mom as a kid, she would have like a piece of graph paper, and she would have cut out little furniture and she would move it around the graph paper that she had, drawn to scale the room that she was, trying to figure out, like, where should we put the furniture in this room? Or she was always the one painting different rooms, different colors. And, their aesthetic is totally different from mine. But like we had this bright red wall in our kitchen growing up. And I never thought anything of it. It was like this high gloss, like deep red that was like had some texture to it because it was like sort of sponge painted in a way. And I'm just like, I just don't think that like most people would just like put this red bold wall in this kitchen, which was a very traditional kitchen, but it was just added such a rich element and depth. And my dad, there was never anything he couldn't build. So it was just, it was a fun way to grow up. And I think maybe sometimes to my detriment, I DIY things. I'm now sort of learning how to let other people help me and conceptualize other people helping me, which is, it's very difficult for me. Like even thinking about like how people can help me, like, especially with like the DIY awards, which is a huge undertaking that I've done myself the past 3 years. And, people are like, tell us how we can help. How can we help you? We want to help you. And I'm just like, that's a really hard question for me. It's harder for me to conceptualize how other people can support me than me just running myself ragged and doing it myself, which is not the healthiest way to do things.
Mm-hmm. But I think that's a sentiment that business owners can relate to, right? Like, when it's like, no, this is my baby and only I can do it. That's just it, and like, and if I try to delegate it, then a lot of times, and I know I struggled with this, and I know Brooke did too, especially if I was the one asking to help her. She was like, no, I can do this better. I can do this better. Why? And so, I think a lot of people can relate there because it's tough letting go. It's tough letting go, for sure.
Yeah, and you spoke to scaling. Like, what does that look like for you? Like, I know I heard Nick talk to you about like how you came from one place to the next, and how did you scale this DIY phase in your entrepreneurial life, I guess, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting because, I think there's traditional ways of doing things. And like initially when I decided to pivot to doing like home renovation stuff, my brain immediately went like, okay, well, the way you do this is you're an interior designer and you take clients. And so that was what I did initially when I kind of moved from wedding photography into doing home renovation stuff. But I think it's important to do things in a way that is authentic and is the way, like, I just don't think that nowadays we need to be doing things that we hate doing just because that's the way that they've always been done. So I very quickly realized that I have a really difficult time working with clients. It gives me a lot of anxiety. And I was like, I don't think that I need to be doing this. Like, I don't need to be doing this. So it's looked a lot like kind of figuring out my own path. A lot of that for me is kind of returning to like my roots of blogging and working with brands and kind of in a more of influencer and content creator capacity. So that's where the majority of my income comes from now. And I really like that because it allows me to, it allows me a lot of freedom to be creative. Like the brand obviously is like, this is what we want to promote. You know, we have this product or this whatever, but they're coming to me because they like my content and they like my authenticity and they want to reach my audience and my community that I've built. So it gives me a lot of ability to be creative and produce content for them, but in my own way. And so I think that that is a way that I've been able to escape from the stress of working with clients, which it can be amazing, but a lot of the times I think as a creative person, it's difficult because you create something that you think is beautiful and you're like, I created this amazing thing. And then they have feedback. And you're like, oh, what?
Not ready for that. Yeah.
You just literally, you just explained my struggle. Like, that's why I don't shoot for like pay or I don't do video work for other people because that's a hard, like when you're running, we're running a couple businesses, you know, and it's kind of like, I don't necessarily have time for the back and forth. It's just got to be a vibe. It's got to be like, you trust me. And then it goes from there. Like Nick, remember when we did the I'm the Man thing? I messed with Nick because we had a vision. He pulled me into his car and he's just like, hey, I got this idea. And I was like, hey man, you broke it down. I was like, oh, I already know what that looks like. And then we just knocked it out. Right. So anyway, I think that's interesting. I just relate to what you're saying big time.
Yeah. And I think, you know, what an interesting transition that you were able to do. And I think people saw this, but I think people would be interested to hear kind of this side of the business of your businesses. So I remember one time you were doing some crazy project as you always do, and I messaged you. I was like, man, I don't know how you do that. That's awesome. That's crazy. And it was like it was the smallest flex, and it was like the most it was the nicest flex, and you go, well, to be fair, this is my job. And I was like, oh shit, like you're doing what you love to do, what you're like great at, and you're getting paid for it. And I know like any small business, it's still tough. There's highs and lows, or the highs are highs, the lows are lows, but like you are able to monetize this. How was that transition? At what point were you like, oh, I can do this and help like support my family? Like, how did you make that a reality?
That's a good question.
It's been interesting because I've been working with brands like since before it was even like a thing that people knew was a thing. Like I was an influencer before that was a word. Like I remember in, like 2009, 2010, in the very early days of my fashion blogging, I was working with ModCloth and Lulu's, and they were sending me clothes, and I would post the clothes with an affiliate, link. And I would sell out of these dresses, and then I would make, whatever percentage on that. So like, it's been interesting because I have been doing it for a long time. And I think the thing that has helped a lot, because I think a lot of people struggle with that. Like, at one point, do I make the transition into doing this full time? And for me, I've just kind of been doing it since 2008, sort of in the background. So to a certain degree, it's like, I'm either like, it's very feast or famine sometimes. And sometimes we're doing great and I'm able to really help support our family. And sometimes Dan's my husband is carrying more of the weight. But I think another thing that's really helped is that like, we have been able to sort of, I guess, house hack in a way, in a way that's like made our living expenses very affordable. Like when we bought our house in 2012, it was a $75,000 house, and like, which is outrageous, you know, like when you think about what houses sell for now and what we sold that house for in 2020. So we've just been able to live, I think, on a shoestring that has really helped me be able to pursue creative endeavors without feeling too much stress, I guess, about finances. I mean, we're stressed about finances all the time, just, you know, because welcome to 2023
right.
and all that.
Yeah.
It's what couples do. It's what we do.
And I think too, there's when you are a creative person and an entrepreneurial person, the amount that your body like rejects the idea of working for somebody else in like a 9-to-5 overwhelms your stress about doing the thing, like hustling to get what you need to, you know, to reach out to the brands, to send the pitches, to do all that kind of stuff. The thought of going to like work at a normal job just gives me, I hate it so much. So yeah, I think that one of the big factors, and you know, it's like, if you don't have that, if you prefer the security, you know, of a job that pays you, you go to it, you get your 9-to-5 or whatever, your salary, then, you know, that's fine. And I know a ton of people who do this and have full-time jobs, and this is on the side, you know, and maybe at a certain point it becomes their full-time gig, and, you know, they're getting really great paid jobs from brand campaigns, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I think that's important too.
Right. And I think there's that fine line, because I think as small business owners, like, we have to be, or I speak for myself, it's like one day I'm like, yeah, small business, I love it. This is what the next day it's like, man, insurance sounds nice. And I'm like, you know, that 9-to-5 is a little appealing. And it just goes back and forth, you know, whether it's every once a month, whatever. It's just the reality of that, you know, the roller coaster of managing your own small business. And so it, you know, kind of going back to the, you know, it takes so much, not only to be consistently doing what you're doing, but again, yeah, you seem to be able to do it within all of the different hats that you've worn at a quality, at a level that, from my point of view, I'm like, oh, so that's the bar. That's how you're supposed to post. That's what the stories are supposed to look like. You know, I mean, even this video and your 4K image compared to my like Etch-a-Sketch looking, I feel like it's, and so it just, you've set the bar. And I know a lot of people are watching and seeing what you're doing, as well as Tacoma's small. Like, there's a lot of us who have been watching from outside for years. And so just hats off to you, because you make it look easy, but you also don't glamorize. Like, you're very honest with your content, and you talk about, you know, hey, whether you're about to push an ad, like you're just very transparent. And I'm curious, like, did you feel the need to, like, okay, I want people to know who I am, what I'm doing, rather than some Instagram, some handles, you go and everything looks perfect, right? And so did you have that sort of mindset or conversation with yourself when creating your platform?
Yeah, I think from the very beginning, I wanted it to be very real and authentic. To use a word that's a little bit overused. But, you know, like in the beginning, when I was a fashion blogger, I was doing, you know, I was thrifting, and I have always thrifted clothes. And so, you know, like in the beginning, there was definitely like fashion bloggers who wear designer clothes and they have like $1,000 purse and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, that's just not me. And that's not who I want to be reaching. That's not what my audience. I want to like see something maybe on the runway or some high fashion cool thing and see how I can recreate that in a way that's like really affordable. And I want to be able to show people how they can take items in their closet and rewear them in different ways. So it's like you're stretching your existing closet. So I've always been creating content in that way, I guess, and being inauthentic just doesn't really feel like it jives with that. Like, let's just pretend everything's perfect. And I think it does a disservice to people, especially now that social media is so much more prevalent than when it was. I mean, when I started blogging, we didn't even have Instagram. So, you know, I think now that people have a much more online life just from using social media, I think it's even more important to be honest about your life. And, you know, especially it blows my mind that people use like Facetune apps to like change their bodies, and you know, people are like, oh, I don't look that way. It's like, well, that person doesn't look that way either. Like, like they've edited it to look a certain way, and I just think that is extremely damaging and, you know, unsafe for our kids. You know, growing up in a world where the people that they're seeing online aren't real people in that aspect, like. And to a certain degree, with social media, it's always going to be a highlight reel. But I think that it's really important to talk about things that aren't painting the picture of perfection, and you know, talking about things that you're passionate about. You know, like I think a lot of influencers will choose not to talk about politics or social issues or, you know, that kind of stuff. We saw a lot of, you know, people who refused to post about like Black Lives Matter when that happened, and, you know, different political things, you know, women's reproductive rights, all that kind of stuff. Like, there's people who choose not to talk about that. And for me, it's like, that's not the type of platform that I want to have. So yeah, it's an interesting balance.
That actually
yeah.
No, sorry. I that segues into it because I'm curious, because I want to bring back up, you mentioned women in the space, and that kind of sat with me because, you know, when you talk about your father, that reminds me of my father-in-law, because my father-in-law is a contractor. They build houses, and grew up with a, you know, contractor as a father, like just that whole life, right? And so how has being a woman, clearly there's a need for women in that space. And what was the moment that you knew that it was, I mean, I know you have that inherent moment, but like I saw, for example, a Black woman on your DIY page, and I was just like, wow, I've never seen that. That's an image you just don't see often, you know? And so at what moment did you know that it was bigger than just like you and your passion? And it was more like, holy crap, like this is an actual thing that is a need and a void in this space, and I'm going to feel that.
Yeah, I think,
Was that
you know, I grew up in Alaska, and it's a very rugged individualism type of place. And I grew up kind of with this sense of femininity, kind of like a negative sense of femininity. I was very much a tomboy. Anything that was like girly, I was like, you know. So I had, I think, and it especially had to do with kind of like my fashion blogging, where I was able to access that femininity again in a way that felt authentic to me. But obviously still having that like ingrained aspect of like being able to work on houses and being able to figure stuff out like that. And through the course of having my blog, I remember just getting comments from people that kind of were just like weird to me. Like, in 2010, I bought an RV, a vintage 1973 Winnebago, and I drove it around the country. And it was like one of those things where people were like, "Oh, I could never do that." Like, "Oh, I would love to, but I could never. And I was just like, why? Like what is holding you back? And I think there's a lot of that internalized, like, oh, I can't do that. And I heard it over and over again, just in different little ways. Like I would bake a recipe and people were like, oh, that looks really good, but I'm terrible at baking. And I'm like, well, you're just following the instructions. You just like, there's a recipe, it has instructions, you just follow it. And if it doesn't work out, you just try it again. And so I think that when I started getting into posting more about DIY stuff, there was kind of that same feedback of like, I would love to do that, but I'm afraid of power tools, or like, I don't even know where to start. And so it felt like an important thing to do, just because I know from so many people telling me, so many women telling me, like, I don't like having contractors in my house because they're weird and sexist and they make me feel uncomfortable, or, they seem like they're overcharging me just because I'm a woman and I don't know any better. So and I think this happened a lot in 2020 when the pandemic hit and people were in their houses and they were just like antsy and you couldn't really hire things out. Like, oh, whatever, I'm stuck in my house. My husband has this drill, I bet I can figure it out. And so I think there was a pretty big explosion of women tapping into working on stuff and using power tools and working on their houses and figuring out that it's not that hard. And like that maybe men have made it seem like it's hard just to sort of keep women out of that space. And it's, it's not hard. It's just like anything else where you learn how to use the tools of the trade and you practice and you get better at it. And it's just been, a place where even now in the trades, like if you're working in the trades as a woman, you're a very small minority. And I think that's changing, but I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of women like DIY, because it gives them back the power in this scenario where, oh, I don't have to hire that contractor out and have him charge me $7,000 for something I can do for $300, or I don't have to have like this weird guy in my house who's gonna like make weird comments about me, or so I think it gives women back a sense of safety and a sense of power, and it's just like a creative thing, and I think women really enjoy creative things, and we've seen it where it's been sewing or quilting or knitting in the past, and it's like, well, you can do that same thing with the circular saw and the drill, and it's just as cool.
That's funny.
Yeah, I think over the last few years, I mean, you're saying that within COVID, within the pandemic, this kind of maybe bloomed a little bit more. Do you see a big DIY community in Tacoma here? And how have you kind of connected with that community?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of people here who, there's affordable houses, but they're nowadays the ones that need a lot of fixing up. And sometimes it's like, well, we were able to afford the house, but not hiring out the work on the house. So now we're just going to take this on ourselves. And I think that's reflected sort of in some of the businesses that we see. Like we've got Second Use, we've got Earthwise that are kind of like focused on those kinds of people. Like I go to Earthwise and I go to Second Use all the time because I can find not only things that will like match the era of my house, but also they're way cheaper than buying them new, and they're way cooler because they're salvaged from these other houses. So yeah, I think that there's a cool community here. I've seen Facebook groups of, women specifically who want to get into using power tools and working on their houses. So I think that there's definitely a community here in Tacoma. And I think too, just in the Pacific Northwest in general, I think it's a place that women feel a little bit more empowered to do non-traditional, things. And so I think that that's kind of another contributing factor potentially, versus like if you're in, I don't know, Alabama and there's a little less freedom in terms of, traditional gender roles. So, yeah.
That's big. No, that's it. You have an important, I don't know. Most people, and for our audience, may not think or may not know about you, for one. For two, may not even think about the fact of women's role in the DIY space or construction space, if you will, or the larger space. And so, yeah, it's just really important. But Nick, do you have any last questions for Liz before we get into the next segment? I can't wait for the next segment.
The next segment.
Yeah.
No,
It's
I think everything we've talked about, kind of hearing, like all the different hats that you've worn, the experiences through all of those different jobs, I think it's also, it's helped, like any business owner, I think it's helped you mold your craft where you currently are. So, how to, utilize the camera, how to do it all. And I think in the space, being a woman in this space, yeah, I mean, I see it. You have this platform that you so, it, again, my point of view, seamlessly, you're carving out this space, that now for me, because I've been watching you for so long, I'm like, no, this is normal. Like, women should be in this space because, well, Liz is doing it. Like, this is normal. And so it is. I guess that's when it comes down to representation. When you can create that space, and a lot of times it's so scary, right? It's like, oh no, it's going to take a lot for me to make space for myself because it's not currently here, right? And for you to have done that, people are watching, and the representation that you're providing for a lot of women, it's a big deal, because whether it's an older woman on their own, or a 20-year-old who's looking to be in their apartment or whatever, there's so many individuals that just giving the encouragement of, no, you can do this. It's a big deal. Representation is a big deal. And I think you're doing a really great job with that. As far as the next segment goes, I assume, Dave, you're talking about why we're here, right?
Man, I got a next segment called Hot Take, but I want to before we get in the hot take, I want to like Nick, even for you talked about representation. We had a moment with Windermere, with our company, where we went up to the headquarters and we watched that North Star video. I think this was 2 years ago or whatever. And you raised your hand and they're like, any feedback? And you're like, well, I didn't see myself in that video. And that completely changed the trajectory of what that looked like down the road. So now and then there was more intentional, moves made in that video to make sure that it represented fully kind of everybody and they could see themselves in it. And we're still continuing to strive to do that, whether it be gender, race, sexual orientation, all the things above, right? So I think that's important. So we're all living it and walking it, and I appreciate all of you for doing that. So, all right, let's talk about the next segment. The next segment is called Hot Take. It's just one. You got to choose one or the other, and there's 5 questions, and don't think too hard about it. Just say yes or no, this or that, and just choose one. All right. Are y'all ready for Hot Take?
Let's do Hot Take.
All right. You ready for Hot Take? So each one of you can answer when I have to ask it. Hot dogs or burgers?
That's not a yes or no question. Burgers.
I would say burgers. I was really grossed out by hot dogs for a long time because I had a sickness episode that involved a hot dog. But I will say that the Red Hot turned that around. So props to the Red Hot. I will do.
Yeah. Shout out to the Red Hat. That's my Ginger
fair.
and her husband. We actually graduated with Ginger. She's Anne's class, and so she really good people. Really good people.
That's fair.
All right, consume or create?
50-50. And sometimes, man, I just want to sit down and consume, and then other times I get. But yeah, I'm 50-50.
Dang, he rode the fence.
I'm obviously create.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're a create guy, Nick. I don't know. The motto of my house is like, or for me is like, I want to create more than I consume. So at the end of the day, I just want to create more.
Okay, I can be fair with that. Like, yeah, I definitely want to create more than, but I can appreciate both. That's
yeah, for sure.
Like,
100%.
yeah.
That's how you get inspired, right? All right, Nick, early mornings or late nights?
Early mornings for sure.
Ooh, Liz.
Late nights. I am not a morning person.
What? My issue is I'm kind of both. I'm not an early morning person, but I wake up, because of kids, yeah. So in my last job, that didn't work out too well because I was like up late and then I was up early. And it's like, yeah, this ain't gonna work. All right. Hammer or a nail gun?
Nail gun. Just sounds. Yeah. And I used one for the first time actually recently. So Liz, you would be proud.
Yeah, nail gun for sure.
Okay, nail gun for sure. All right, last one, and this is kind of similar to the create or consume one, but just more in depth. Would you rather watch a series or scroll the socials?
Watch a series. Yeah. If we didn't need social media, man. I wish we could cut it out, but we don't. It's a good platform to have, but definitely watching a series with friends and my wife or whatever. For me.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Liz.
I feel like I do them at the same time. I'm just like, don't.
Shit.
True.
Yeah, probably socials. I mean, if we looked at what my screen time is on a daily basis, that's gonna tell you all you need to know.
Yeah, probably. All right. Well, thank you for playing Hot Take. And one thing that I want to make sure that we cover is the DIY Awards. And Liz, I want to just unleash you to let people know about the DIY Awards. What is it? Why did you start it? And how can they get tapped in?
Yeah, so the DIY Awards I started at the end of 2020. And it was just kind of like a fun idea. I had some leftover butcher block from when we did our kitchen, and I was like, I like trophies. I'm an Enneagram 3, so I really love awards. Anytime I can have a trophy, that's great for me. And so I was like, well, maybe other people would like trophies, and it would be really fun to like create these trophies, like make little trophies out of this butcher block, and then like spray paint these tools that, like leftover tools. I had found like a hammer in an alley on one of my walks with my son, and we had brought it home. And so I like made these little trophies, and then we just did a very informal, like people submitted nominations through like question form on Instagram stories and then voted. And it was just a really fun thing, and people seemed to really love it. And there wasn't anything else like it in the DIY social media industry. It didn't seem like, there's awards for other things, but there was nothing specific for the DIY home renovation influencer content creator space. And that first year I didn't say specifically that this is, only nominate women, but it turned out that only women were nominated. And so obviously only women won. And I really liked that it highlighted women and lifted up women in, a traditionally male-dominated space. So the next year, we made it specifically only for women and made it a little bit more official, and we had some sponsors. And so those past 2 years, it's all just been online. We did the awards ceremony on Instagram Live. But my dream for it was always to have like an in-person awards ceremony event where it could be like the Oscars for DIYers, and they could come and really just like have an opportunity to celebrate the people in this community who are inspiring us and encouraging us and empowering us, and also give an opportunity for people who, you know, a lot of the times the only way that we get to meet people online is going to like big conferences, and that's kind of exclusive to like people who are trying to make this their business or their livelihood. It's very expensive, you know, the tickets to that, plus the airfare and all that kind of stuff can really be a huge chunk of change. So it's a little out of reach for anybody who just like wants to go and like meet the people who inspire them. So I wanted it to be more of an event that anybody could come to. And so we're doing that this year. The DIY Awards voting just ended, so I know who all the winners are now, and I'm very excited. And so the event will be here in Tacoma on January 28th, and it's going to be really fun. We have a production company that we have hired to broadcast the event live streamed. So it'll be live streamed on YouTube and on Instagram as well, so people can tune in who aren't able to make it to the event. But yeah, I really want this to be an event that grows and is more robust moving forward now that we're able to have in-person events again. And yeah, it's just really exciting to be able to do it in Tacoma. I love Tacoma. I think it's such a great creative city that is approachable and like very comfortable. You know, I never felt like I was like a Seattle person. You know, being from Alaska, I need something that's a little bit more intimate, and, you know, being able to find parking downtown without losing fun. So it's been really fun to be able to be a part of Tacoma as a community. And so my hope is that this can be an event, not just for the DIY community as a whole, you know, at large online, but also just something for Tacoma people as well, and just coming together and having a fun event to be able to come to. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. I have a discount code for any of you guys who want to come. So you can get 25% off your ticket using the code LOCALFRIENDS. So
hey,
yeah.
All right, we'll put that. Make sure we put that in the comments for sure, or maybe, or for us, whatever. I don't know. That we'll talk about it. But yeah. Well, thank you, and that's awesome. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah. So just to recap, so January 28th, where do you go to book a ticket to claim a ticket? Where do I go?
So you can find all the information on the DIY Awards Bash, the event, at lizmorrowstudios.com/awardsbash. And if you go to any of my social media, the link will be in the bio as well. So my Instagram is @liz.morrow. So you can just go there and click that if you don't want to remember any of that URL. And yeah, so the link to buy the tickets will be on there. It's on Eventbrite. So if you go on Eventbrite, you can also search the DIY Awards and it should pop up. But yeah.
Cool. And we'll make it easy whenever we push this out. We'll make it easy for people to find the links and whatnot. That's what Dave gets paid to do. So
they all
not
laugh.
just that. But sweet. Unless there's anything else you want to put on blast, this was a super fun conversation. Just hearing about your story, where you came from and where you are, and that you did it in Tacoma, and kind of the platform that you kind of built, not only for yourself, but as a platform for women to be in the space that you're in. So congratulations. Please keep doing what you're doing. I look forward to seeing everything that you create in the future. Yeah, Dave, you got anything?
I'll take us out. So thank y'all for listening. Out. Thank you, Nick. Nick, where do people find you if they want to get in touch with you?
NickCasanova.com. You can go to my website there, all things Nick, as well as my Instagram, La Casanova. La Casanova. That's where I reside. So,
All right. Well, thank y'all for listening. This was a really dope conversation. Season 8 is underway. I'm excited. 2023 is about to be a dope. We got Liz Morrow in the house. We got Tacoma. We got the DIY awards. It's lit. We got
get
La
yourself a nail
Casanova.
gun. Everyone's gonna get
Go get yourself a nail
after
gun. You heard it. And we'll see y'all next week for the next episode. But anyway, thanks for listening. Peace.
Cool. Cheers.